सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Pew Research Organization has produced a big study. Basically, it has put China, Xi Jinping, the Chinese system, the Chinese military, all of that to a popularity test across the world, but more specifically in 19 developed countries. 19 developed countries. And what are the results? Results are out. In fact, results are out just around time we are beginning to see this. We are publishing this because there was an embargo on the report only to be published at noon at Washington time. So we are publishing it exactly on time now. Now the results are out, and what do the results tell us? Results tell us that China, Xi Jinping, etc., Chinese military have notched up a score of 80% plus. So they are 80%ers, but don't start celebrating, because this is 80% on the negative side. So 80% people in these 19 important countries have a negative view on China on almost all indicators, to the extent of 80%. 80% have a negative view on China, Xi Jinping, threat from Chinese military, China's record on human rights, etc., etc. Now that looks quite ugly from China. Now the question you might ask me is that maybe this was always like that on China. What has changed? So this research, or this report that Pew has now put out, this actually tracks public opinion on China, global public opinion over 20 years. And this tells us what has changed over 20 years. So in 20 years, there is a secular decline on the world's view on China. But importantly, and you will see some of these graphics which we will republish courtesy the Pew Research Organization, and thank you very much, Pew, for letting us do so and producing these fine reports and fine graphics. If you see these graphics, you will see that these graphics, you can see that public opinion in various countries most of the countries is worsening for China, but there is one point at which it just shoots up like this. It's as if a rocket's taken off at that point. That is the negative view on China. So when does that happen? That usually happens in 2016-17. And you can then figure out why that is happening. And I will also try and give you some data and some facts there as to what is happening. So first of all, see some of the major countries. Now, I thought I will take all the Five Eyes countries, but all Five Eyes countries are not here because New Zealand isn't here. But Four Eyes are here, that is UK, Australia, US, and Canada, and some other major countries. So these I will mention on camera for you, but all the graphics will run on the screen as we talk. And I will then list the names of the countries where this survey has been held, from where this data has been analyzed, and each country's graphic will then run as I talk. So the US 20 years back, that is 2001, 35% people had a negative view of China. That is 1 in 3 approximately, 35%. What is it now? 82%. 82%. That's some progress. And once again, you see that between somewhere near 2016-17, I suspect that is where Xi Jinping is about to complete his first term and come up for his re-election. And that's when he's begun some show of power, not just in his neighborhood, but globally on trade, etc. And that's where suddenly opinion on him worsens in the US as well. So US 35 to 82, 35% negative to 82% negative, and positive runs exactly in the same proportion. 43% positive in 2001. It's now down to 16% positive. In fact, I'd like to meet the 16% positive walas on China in America. Canada, 27% negative in 2001. 74% negative now. So approximately the same proportion for the US 35 to 82, Canada 27 to 74. And how many like China? 58% liked China in 2001 in Canada. Today it is down to 21%. So Canada was, I would say, a rare country in 2001 where China was very, very popular. 58% affirmation rating for another big country, and that were country not in your alliances and generally on the adversarial side was very good. That 58% in Canada has now become 21%, whereas negative has gone up from 27 to 74%. UK was 16% negative in 2001. Now it's 69% negative. And in fact, this is data is still from about a year ago. I think this year, with more changes in the world, this data would have moved. All this data would have moved in the same direction and would have looked even starker than it is. So UK 16% negative in 2001 to 69% negative now. Positive in 2001, 65% was positive. So again, China was a very popular country in UK in 2001. Now it's 27%. Look at other countries. Look at France. It's the negative view, and France usually has a different view from the rest of the Western world because in France there are the French. There live the French. So in France, again, the negative view has increased from 40 to 68, and positive view of China has gone down from 58 to 26. There are some interesting countries there also. There is Greece, for example. Greece had a negative view of 38 in 2001. It's 50% now. So not that much difference, but still movement in that same direction. And positive view has gone down from 56 to 44, again a member of NATO, etc. But Greece also is at the other end of Europe, has its own view of the world, and a lot of its worldview is also then shaped by what's happening between Greece and Turkey. So Greece is sort of has a middling public opinion on China. Israel, the most fascinating. Israel, no change. In 2001, 45% had a negative view of China. Today, it's gone up to what? To 46%. By 1 percentage point. So 45 to 46%. Positive view from 45% to 48%. So Israel is a dead heat on both sides. But Israel again is a country very pro-Western, but very friendly to China and has no real apprehensions of China because China is a big market for Israel, and China and Israel are now moving towards signing a very important trade treaty. So once again, evidence also that nations decide their foreign policy imperatives purely based on the national interest, not morality, not alliances, not nothing. Now, there are also countries which are positive. For example, Singapore, Malaysia, right? And you can understand why, because these countries are neighbors of China. Countries also have population of Chinese origin. There is the ASEAN connection. In fact, we find in poll after poll, Singapore is the friendliest or the most positive country on China. Now, I told you I will list the 19 countries for you. So here these are. And as I mentioned the names of the countries, you will see these graphics come up on the screen. These are graphics on how negative opinion and positive opinion has progressed. And you can see the graphic in the darker color. That's going up in each case is negative opinion. There is no contradiction there. In every country, negative opinion has actually gone up. So public opinion has worsened for China for 20 years, but much more under Xi Jinping in his 10 years. He's now just coming up for his re-election, an unlikely, unusual, unprecedented election for the third term. In China, the president is only given 2 terms, but Xi Jinping is Xi Jinping. He's changed the constitution, law, whatever you call it, for himself. And that's happening in just a couple of weeks from now. And that's why this survey and data becomes that much more important. So see, the US, Canada, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Poland, Italy, and you will see all these graphics as they come up. So you have US, Canada, the Netherlands, UK, Poland, Italy, and these graphics will stay on the screen for a couple of moments as I speak. Italy, Spain, Germany, Sweden, Belgium, France, Hungary, Greece, Israel, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Singapore. Again, as we go ahead, you will find that another country that's really, really anxious about China is South Korea. I know you would have loved to see India in this list. I would have also loved to see India in this list. But Pew says that because of the COVID situation, they've not been able to do repeat surveys in emerging economies over the past couple of years, whereas they've been able to do so in the more advanced countries. So maybe India will come later, but we have some reference points to data on India, and we can imagine that movement will only be in that direction, and we can then at least in our minds do an extrapolation. We might not be able to do it accurately. We might not have precise data. So the report, for example, gives us references to data on India, on how unpopular, popular China is in India. It tells us in 2015, that is a time when Narendra Modi is reaching out to China in a big way, and these Jappi Papi summits are taking place, right? Photo ops on the swing, etc., etc. That's when in 2015, Indian public opinion is 32% negative on China. In India, China was never very popular, and you can imagine why. But 2015, it was 32%. By 2019, it had become 46% negative. That's the data we have. But it's in 2020 that the Chinese came sort of knocking very rudely at our doors in Ladakh, and have sat on dharna since then there. So I can imagine that it will be, if anything, much worse than it is in most of these developed economies. So it will be somewhere in the ballpark of 90%, if not more. And of those who do not find China unpopular in India, I'd like to meet them and maybe at least seek their autographs, because they'll be such rare Indians. And I'd also like to know why. Now, this survey also looks at some specific aspects. For example, do you have confidence in President Xi Jinping? Now, most of the world says they have very poor confidence in Xi Jinping. Look at the numbers. In US, first category is no confidence, and the second category is not too much confidence. So we combine the two because these are negatives on Xi Jinping. In US, 40% say no confidence. Canada, 49% say no confidence. Surprise of surprises for a country that's not so particularly political or polarized. Sweden, 59% say no confidence in Xi Jinping. Although when you read the finer data later in the report, and I will share the full report with you, there are countries which are also deeply affected with China's human rights record under Xi Jinping. In fact, if you look at a lot of that data, and I will not go into all of that because then this will go into an hour, when you see more of the data, you will find that more and more countries among the advanced economies of the world are even more worried about China's human rights record under Xi Jinping, particularly vis-a-vis the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, than about China's military bullying or economic competition from China. So Sweden, that's a surprise from me. 59% no confidence. France, 54% no confidence. UK, 37% no confidence. Israel, 33%, and thereby again hangs the tail. And South Korea, 45% say no confidence. Australia, very interesting, 54% say no confidence. So on and so forth. Now, if you add up the figures in the second table, which is not too much confidence, still not too much confidence or very little confidence. So we combine the two. That number for the US is 42, Canada is 28, Sweden is 26, France is 26, UK is 33, Israel 37, South Korea 42, Australia 34, etc. So see, what does that add up to? If you add up the two figures, then the negative view on Xi Jinping among these countries, and I'm not listing all of the 19, you will see the table, the full table on my screen taken from the Pew report, and please see that, take a screenshot, or in any case I'm sharing with you the entire Pew report, make use of it. All the data is quotable. So in America, the negative view of Xi Jinping is 41%, no confidence, plus 42%, very little confidence, if any. That comes to 83%. So 83% in America have no confidence in Xi Jinping. In Canada, it's 77%. Sweden is 85%, although most of that is coming from the human rights issues. UK, 80%. Israel, 70%. And that's why I said thereby also hangs a tail, because in Israel, China is not so unpopular. And yet 70% of Israelis say they don't particularly have any confidence in Xi Jinping, because Israelis are not looking at the leader, not looking at China's politics. They are just looking at their own strategic and business interests, which they see as being aligned with China. So 70% in Israel. South Korea is a neighboring country to China. Deep economic relations, but a lot of tensions lately, because you know why? Because North Korea has been firing these missiles. North Korea is seen to be a Chinese protectorate, if not a vassal. And the South Koreans have been worried. So because they got worried, they imported these very quick reaction American missiles called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D. You will see the full form on my screen. They installed these missiles. The Chinese reacted very sharply, and the South Koreans have now begun to see China more through the prism of their security interests or security threats. So South Korea, 87% are negative on Xi. And if you thought this is the worst, can't get worse than this, then you don't know the Aussies. The Australians, Australia add 54% absolute negative to 34% to mostly negative. If you add the two, it's 88%. So the highest score that Xi Jinping scores is in Australia, but highest of the negatives. That's 88%. But then there are countries where it's not doing so badly. For example, if you look at Malaysia, Singapore, once again, these are countries where actually Xi Jinping is seen in a very positive light. So in Malaysia, negative is only 11%, in Singapore 9%, somewhat negative or not much confidence is 26% and 21%. So affirmative rating for Xi Jinping in Malaysia and Singapore, that means people trust him, is 62% for Malaysia and 69% for Singapore. So it's not as if the whole world hates Xi Jinping. There are places where he can go and chill in some comfort that a majority of the people actually like him. And if you see the 19-country median, the average for 19 countries, then it is 76% people who do not trust Xi Jinping. So that is a very important data set. Once again, are you worried about China's military powers? In this case, I'm just telling you, describing a few countries to you, important countries, but again, most of the graphics will run on my screen with the names of the countries. You can store them, and the original report also is with you with the description of this video. So in the US, and US is a Five Eye Alliance country, US, Canada, UK, Australia. US, Canada, UK, Australia. Is the Chinese military power a problem? Not a very serious problem. Only 14% in the US say that. Less than 1 in 7 say that. Canada also, about 1 in 6 say that. Only 17%. UK, only 1 in 5, 20%. Australia, even less than that. Say about 1 in 8. So that tells you that these 4 of the Five Eyes Alliance countries, we told you New Zealand is missing here, there very few people do not see the Chinese military as a threat. On an average, about 1 in 7 sees the Chinese military as not a threat, which means 6 in 7 see the Chinese military as a threat. If you want to see the larger number, what percentage see the Chinese military as a threat? For the US, it's 85%, because 43% see it as a very serious threat, 42% see it as a somewhat serious threat. So add it up, it's 85%. For UK, it's 76%. For Australia, and once again, I told you can never count the Aussies out. For Australia, it's 90%. 90%. And once again for South Korea, it's 85%. So these two countries, not far from China. Okay, Australia maybe geographically is quite far in terms of distance, but it's the same region. It's the same Indo-Pacific region. So the countries that see China as the biggest military threat to them are Australia and South Korea. Now you might ask me that how come am I missing out Japan? I'm not missing out Japan. I thought I will talk about Japan in a separate category because Japan's a country that started out having the most negative view of China almost 15, 17 years ago. That's when Chinese expansionism started. Chinese started sort of dusting up their old claims over Senkaku Islands and near clashes. Clashes didn't take place, but a very fraught situation came up. So the Japanese, say in 2013, had a negative rating of China going up to 93%. Today, it's about 88%, 88, 87. If you see the last 4 years, the Chinese have been very consistent in late 80s in terms of their negative view about them in Japan. Today, if you see the Japanese, the view on Xi Jinping, 89% is negative. On the Chinese military, is it a threat? 88% is negative. No surprise. In fact, I'm surprised that 12% don't see it as a threat. On human rights, China's human rights record, 90% negative. So Japan, if anything, has the most negative view of China, Xi Jinping, Chinese military, Chinese record on human rights, even marginally worse than Australia. So why is it so important? Because Australia and Japan are both Quad members. These two Quad members and America. And you can see the distrust of China is almost even among all these countries. And that's a very important point. Now see this other interesting graphic from this report. This says this is a median. Median means an average of people polled in these 19 countries on which country's influence do you think is growing in the world? And that's a fascinating data point. 66% think that China's influence is growing in the world. That you can understand, that is 2/3 of them. Russia, that's a surprise, but maybe it will be different now after the invasion. I don't know the timing. This obviously was before the invasion. So 41% think Russia's influence is growing, but that's also because Putin had been making himself a lot more visible, doing things and painting on the larger strategic radar screen even before the invasion of Ukraine. Russia also was seen to be playing a role of some kind in American politics, in American elections. Then you see US. 32% think US's influence is growing. 28%. The next is India. So China, Russia, US, India. So in this poll of 19 developed countries, India has the ranking of number 4 behind China, Russia, and US, being a country whose influence is rising. And India is at 28%, which is ahead of Germany at 26%, France at 21%, and UK at 18%. So these are all important points. And once again, when you start looking at deeper data, so this is another chart. You see what is my country's biggest problem with China, and see these countries what they are coming up with. So you see America, human rights 42%, 42 out of 100 say human rights is my biggest problem. Military, China's military expansion, say 43. Economic competition 35. But China's interference in my internal affairs and politics, 47. That's very high. So 47%, that's almost half the Americans think that the Chinese are interfering in their own internal political affairs and they don't like it. In Canada, it's 34%. In UK, it's 22%. And where is it worse? It's worst in the two countries closest to China. One geopolitically, that's Australia at 52%. And second, geographically, that is South Korea at 54%. So these countries, more than half the population thinks, they worry that the Chinese are interfering in my internal politics and in my internal affairs. Now, if you see all these graphics, in conclusion, I will tell you there is a certain inflection point to almost all these graphics, barring the countries which are exceptions, say Israel, Singapore, Malaysia, to some extent Hungary. But all the other countries, you see a pattern. The pattern is that from 2001, slowly negative view of China is rising. Then it starts rising a little bit faster, say about 2012-13. And then around 2016-17, it really shoots up. It's like a straight hockey stick. That is the negative view. Similarly, if you see the positive view, it sort of, the bottom drops out of it. It falls almost vertically like this. It's almost like a reverse hockey stick. So why has that happened? And why has that happened in 2016-17? So once again, we can only guess, but we can make an educated guesswork. And that is because that is around time Xi Jinping is becoming really strong. Remember 2015, he came to India. That's when the Chinese soldiers came to Chumar. That was settled. But 2017, they came to Doklam. They were giving us even more trouble, and then the Chinese became more and more belligerent. We know what happened in our neighborhood. But remember, 2014, 15, 16 is also the period when the Chinese, Xi Jinping's China, started that new Great Wall of Sand movement, whereby they were bringing in sand and conjuring up islands from shallow waters of the seas, and then claiming it to be their own property, setting up airstrips there, and then claiming territorial waters around it, and then exclusive economic zone. And that got neighboring countries with whom China has always had disputes over maritime boundaries very, very worried. So it is around 2016-17 when Xi Jinping is heading for his second term, and by that time he's feeling powerful, his economy has grown, and he's then begun saber rattling. So it's that time that suddenly China begins to get unpopular at a very rapid pace. And if you see all these graphics, they tell you the same story. In fact, this data also tells us that by 2018-19, China's unpopularity in America among Republicans and Democrats had come almost at the same level. So there was at least one thing in America, in American public opinion, which is otherwise so polarized, where there was total bipartisanship. And frankly, if you check out any of these countries that we have mentioned, including India, which is not listed here, you will see that this view of China will be the one thing on which there will be an almost total bipartisanship. So does Xi Jinping have to worry about it? It's his choice, but he doesn't have to, because all of this will not hurt him or his prospects for his second term in continuing on with his dictatorial power for as long as he wishes in China. Because I suspect that is the playbook of the macho male of the nationalistic right. Also, right is somehow sort of anachronistic if I use it for a Chinese leader, but this is the nationalist right. That more unpopular you are overseas, the more scared people are of you overseas, the more popular you become within your domestic crowd, or at least within your own party, or maybe they also become even more fearful of you.